Thank you very much, Braun. The discussion is open. We have time to very important. Yes, Nicholas.
Can I make more of an observation, and that is that Gutenberg did not write the books. And that's a very important point, because I have, over the course of my life, seen so many new programs, like Minitel, for example. Those of you old enough to remember it, they thought they had to write the content. And I've seen in education programs where people said, we have to write the textbooks. So I would take a little exception with the content, because I think it will happen. And the point is not that make it and they will come, but an open internet provides that opportunity. And if we spend too much time on content, not just about agriculture, but all the other areas, we will come to a screeching halt. And I think that's a general principle. It's not a critique of your presentation.
Well, the printing press was important to unleash big change in human thinking, education, and so on, no doubts. But what I observe, let me stick to the area which I think I understand quite well, that is agriculture and the current use of connectivity and the impact of connectivity on farming communities. We have a sea change of difference between, a huge gap between technical opportunity and meaningful use of the technology. I'm not saying that those who provide the infrastructure and the access so that connectivity can happen should also be the ones who write the apps and the Gutenberg books, yeah? The apps on the smartphones of farmers' cooperatives. But we need to bring these communities together. Currently they operate disjointed, even in the pioneering countries such as Kenya. Hundreds of little things happening, and the learning over the last 8 years, very slow, very slow. The bundling is not there. And maybe you can respond to the following question. Why has the initiative not come about to bring a meaningful platform where these initiatives come together? Hasn't happened. So a farmer who operates a cornfield in Kenya, has a pig, a cow, and needs to connect to a local market, would, if he or she would be smart, go to 4 different apps, some of which cost money, and it's useless for them, and that's why the picking up of new technologies are not happening. Maybe the platform investment is required in addition to the connectivity.
Just think that the word I stumble on is meaningful. And I stumble on it because I don't think there is any way to define what meaningful means. When I personally was involved in installing things in very rural parts of Cambodia, meaningful for one kid meant that he had learned Excel and he built an inventory of his mother's little local shop. For another person, they had discovered YouTube and they ran a cinema out of their house. For somebody else, it was more directly. There are so many forms of meaningfulness that if we have to create or even in some way coordinate meaningful applications, then connectivity becomes this extraordinary burden that we will just never, we'll never get the connectivity.
That one I agree. Meaningful means in a context. Out of context, a standard connectivity definition wouldn't make any sense to me either. But it is not a 0-1 thing, what connectivity means either. So I think for the individual and for the community and for a country, the connectivity needs to be defined in terms of affordability, infrastructure, usability, and so on. We need criteria for that. You probably have them already. But I use the term meaningful in order to prompt a discussion that we don't just think that once you have access to internet, at high cost, in principle access to internet at high cost and low download speed with occasional use opportunity, that connectivity has been reached. We need standards for that. And we currently don't have them in all these red shaded countries in Africa.
Thank you, Antonio. Let me follow on this because I spent a lot of time doing a very detailed review of all the use of ICTs for agriculture, both SMS messages, extension, and so on and so forth. And what we found was that in most of the cases of the papers we review, and I had a graph, but I deleted to make it fast, but like in 80% of the cases, when the penetration was very low, so the access, in this case cellular phones, was very low, any reduction of asymmetry of information was good, like the fishery paper and so on and so forth. But when we arrive to a situation where the penetration is higher, then basically what really matters is the information that really creates a difference in terms of the value I can have when I put my product in the market. And what happened is that many of the papers were looking at SMS system of prices that were useless for the farmer because the farmer didn't like the information of the central market in the capital. What the farmer cared was information in the local market. So I think the meaningful means something that they really care about. And what they really care about is basically the local prices to be able to make transactions that they do and to improve and reduce the transaction cost. The same applies with extension services. In most of the cases, they were not able to understand what is being provided through them, through tablets and so on and so forth, in terms of extension services. So trying to figure out at least what are the needs and try to respond through those needs through connectivity could be useful, but the risk, and that could take time, and I don't think we're talking of something that, I think you can do it simultaneously, you don't need to do it sequentially, because the content, for me, the connectivity just reduces the cost effectiveness. I can provide the content in paper, and if it is the same quality as the one I provide in internet, I get the same result, and we did that with Dilip Mukherjee in India, with potato producers. The issue is the velocity, and where is the risk? The risk is that you can supply content through internet, which could really create a negative effect. For example, today, they are providing information on fertilizer packages for Africa, for Senegal and West Africa, of fertilizers that are not needed by the soil. As a result of that, farmers are throwing their money to the trash, and they're not getting a millimeter in productivity. And that's because they never check soil maps, and they never check what really was needed in that location. So again, I don't see a sequence. I see that they complement and they go together, but we need to do an effort also to assure that we use that connectivity in something proper.
Sorry, no, it's a distraction. It is a total distraction, and you have to understand that, because of course we need to do that, but that isn't what connectivity is about. You really can give connectivity, pure and simple, and you want a definition, 56 kilobits 2 ways. There's a thing, and you connect everybody, and it's free. And if you do those things, those sort of apps will emerge very fast. Otherwise, we'll be spending all of our time doing that for banking, doing it for this, we're doing it for all sorts of things.
That I disagree. The big difference between the Uruguay case and the Peruvian case is the content. Uruguay invested significantly in improving the content, apart from the bureaucratic problems that there were a lot of computers deployed. There are 2 very good papers about the quality of intervention. And the big difference between the two were the way they managed the content. They put a lot of effort in the content. Peru didn't.
Some other question? Lambert?
Thank you very much for your talk. I have just a short question about the impact of connectivity in farming on traditions and cultural values. How do you tackle this problem of, for example, vanishing of some cultural value due to the introduction of the standards of connectivity in farming?
Would you give me an example of a cultural value?
The problem related to, for example, the standardization of some method in agriculture and vanishing of some traditional way to conceive farming, for example. How do you tackle this problem of cultural values and new technologies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this is an old debate, the debate over how farm machinery may destroy culture. The combine harvester was blamed for destroying culture in the 1950s by certain, including German philosophers with whom I disagree. But the change which is in the making will certainly change culture. It may reduce collective action in agriculture because group farming will be declining. But the 52% which I showed you from Ethiopian and other African young people who consider leaving or staying, they don't want this culture. They want a different life in rural space. And their peer groups don't work with a hoe, but work with mechanization and connect to markets and have infotainments in rural areas and not just the current life. So I think to some extent the technological change is endogenous to the desire for change of culture rather than the other way around.
Okay, clear. Well, thank you, Von Braun, for your very interesting presentation. And now I invite Maximo Torero to give his talk. Please, Maximo.
Thank you so much.